The starship drifted through silent space as stars burned like distant vows and the walls hummed with restrained power and ancient purpose. Inside the command corridor, the alien queen stood beneath living crystal arches watching every breath of the ship as if it were her own heart. Her crown was not metal but light shaped by centuries of rule and sacrifice, and it glowed softly as her thoughts moved across generations. Across from her, the human officer stood calm and steady, holding a control sphere that carried codes older than many empires. The sphere rested in his hands with quiet gravity that pulled at every soul aboard the vessel. This device held the fate of worlds not as a threat, but as a choice waiting for intent. The queen studied the human carefully, sensing no hunger for dominance, only a disciplined resolve shaped by loss and duty. She remembered the first contact when humans were seen as fragile sparks in a storm of stars. Now one stood here unbowed before her with the power to end wars or begin a future no one had dared imagine. The corridor light shifted color as the ship adjusted course, responding to unseen commands and deep cosmic currents. Guards from many species stood still along the walls, each one trained for battle yet frozen by the weight of the moment. The human officer spoke with a voice that carried neither fear nor pride, but a careful honesty shaped by experience. He said that every world deserved the chance to choose its path without annihilation hanging like a blade above the sky. The queen felt an echo of ancient prophecy stirring in her mind, words spoken long before humans reached the stars. She stepped closer, her presence filling the corridor with quiet authority and unspoken history. She asked him why a human would be trusted with such power when even elder races had failed its test. He answered that trust was not given to him but demanded by the moment and owned by restraint. Memories flickered through the queen of burned planets and treaties written in ash. She remembered the day she took the throne after watching her homeworld survive by a breath. Her people believed strength was measured by control, yet here stood a being who measured it by refusal. The ship trembled slightly as external fleets repositioned, waiting for the signal that would decide everything. Beyond the hull, thousands of vessels aimed weapons that could fracture suns or silence civilizations. Inside the corridor, only breath and thought moved as time stretched thin. The queen reached out not to take the sphere, but to feel the human will behind it. She sensed grief for fallen comrades and hope stubborn, and alive like a flame protected by cupped hands. She asked what choice he would make if her empire turned its weapons on Earth. He said he would still choose restraint if there remained even one path toward peace. This answer struck deeper than any threat ever could. The queen realized that power without mercy had brought her people only endless vigilance and sorrow. She turned toward the observation window where galaxies spiraled like stories without end. Her voice carried across the corridor as she declared that the era of enforced silence would end today. She said the fate of worlds should no longer rest on fear but on shared responsibility. The human officer inclined his head not in submission, but in respect, recognizing a ruler willing to risk change. He activated the sphere not to fire weapons, but to unlock communication arrays sealed since ancient wars. Signals burst outward carrying invitations rather than ultimatums. Across space, fleets hesitated and powered down as messages reached leaders long hardened by conflict. The queen felt the ship breathe easier as systems shifted from battle readiness to open diplomacy. Some advisors protested quietly, fearing betrayal and weakness. The queen silenced them with a glance forged in centuries of command. She said survival without growth was only delayed extinction. The human watched as history bent around a single decision shaped by trust. He thought of Earth with its blue oceans and fragile skies and felt hope stretch wider than fear. The Starship altered course toward a neutral assembly world long abandoned after old massacres. Now it would host voices once silenced by pride and vengeance. As hours passed, delegations began to arrive, each one cautious yet curious. The corridor transformed into a hall of convergence where languages and lights mingled. The queen stood at the center, no longer alone in her burden. The human officer remained nearby not as a guard but as a witness to possibility. Some envoys challenged the decision, accusing the queen of surrender. She replied that peace required more courage than conquest ever had. The human was asked why his species would risk trust so early in its galactic journey. He said humanity had learned the cost of division too many times on one small world. He said the stars offered a chance to do better rather than repeat the same tragedies on a larger scale. Silence followed as the weight of those words settled across species and centuries. Agreements began not as binding chains, but as frameworks for understanding and shared defense. The Queen felt something unfamiliar growing within her, not triumph but relief. For the first time since ascending the throne, she did not feel alone against the universe. The human officer handed the sphere to the Queen, offering it freely. She accepted, then placed it upon a pedestal where it would remain accessible to all signatories. This act symbolized a future where no single hand would decide the end of worlds. As the assembly concluded, the Starship light softened, mimicking dawn on countless planets. Outside, the hull fleets dispersed not in retreat, but in renewed purpose. The Queen looked at the human and said that history would remember this day as a turning point. He answered that history was written by those willing to trust tomorrow. They stood together, watching stars drift by no longer as battlefields, but as homes waiting to be known. In that quiet moment inside a living ship, the fate of worlds shifted not through force, but through choice. And the universe listened and for once chose to hope. ChatGPT can